the toilets here? It's whenever you open the door, you kind of look for the toilets for the light switch, and it kind of comes on automatically. And I got a déjà vu from one time I brought my grandfather to the doctor, and he was telling the doctor his symptoms. And one thing he kept saying was, "Doctor, whenever I go down to have a pee at night, the bathroom door or the bathroom light comes on." And we didn't have an automatic light like this. So the doctor said to him, "James," he says, "you're peeing in the fridge again." He says. Right, so I got that déjà vu. So I said, I need to get it off my chest before, yeah, okay. So my Dublin story starts in Tipperary. I told as it would, right? So his name was Davy Condon, and he was a religious man, a sheep farmer, part-time alcoholic, and he liked telling stories as well. So he had about 10 children. That's about what I know about Davy. But he lived across the road from this rented cottage. And these people used to come there for the summer to rent out the cottage. And this one guy, he was a Scottish Presbyterian, and he kind of came there for 4 or 5 different summers, for maybe 3 or 4 month intervals. And himself and Davy set up a bit of a rapport. And they would kind of talk about weather, and they would talk about Scotland and Ireland, and about farming, and about hill farming and hill walks and all these things. But Davy had a sheepdog bitch who just had 2 pups, so that was one thing they talk about as well. And it was 1978 was the year, and it was the year of the 2 popes. So the Presbyterian was reading the newspaper, and he kind of said to Davy one morning, he said, "Hi Davy," he said, "I heard your pope died." So this was the Pope John Paul I he was talking about, and Davy thought he was talking about his pups, you know, and he says, "Was it the black fella or the white fella?" he said. And the Presbyterian guy said, "Oh, I didn't know you had 2. And then Davy said, "It's all a matter. I was going to drown both bastards anyway," he said. So this was the Davy, right? And then we went on to 1979, when the second Pope, or whatever, I don't know, was he the 3rd Pope? It was John Paul, the Polish guy. Yeah. And he was visiting Ireland, and he was up in Phoenix Park, and a lot of the local people went to see him in Shannon, but Davy wanted to be a bit different, and he decided to go to Phoenix Park to see the Pope. So his mother was still alive, so she went in with him to the bus in Clonmel, and she had made him sandwiches, ham sandwiches, Hank sandwiches as she used to call them, wrapped in tin foil with a dollop of mustard and a bottle of tea. So she gave him this in a brown paper bag, and she says, "There's your lunch now, Davy. You can eat. You can have it when you get to Naas." So that was fine anyway. Davy was never further north than Cashel, which was about 12 miles north of Clonmel. He went there one time to the hospital. One of his sons had an accident or something like that, so they had an emergency. Anyway, so Davy was there, and when he got beyond Cashel, he was trying to think of the names of the next towns. There might have been Carlow and Kilkenny, and every time they passed the town, Davy would go down to the bus driver and say, "Is this Naas?" Because the stomach was starting to rumble on him a bit, you know. And they got to Port Leash, "Is this Naas?" And no, and the bus driver was getting a little bit annoyed with him. And he said, "Listen," he said, "sit down there," he says, "I'll remember you." He says, "I'll tell you when we're in Naas." So Davy sat down anyway, and he kind of enjoyed the trip and sightseeing and all of that. So the bus was pulling up to the Red Cow roundabout just outside Dublin, and the bus driver gave a look in the mirror, and he saw this guy sitting in the edge of his seat towards the back of the bus, and he says, "Jesus, I forgot about your man from Naas." So he turned around the bus anyway at the Red Cow roundabout and headed back to Naas, right, and stopped the bus outside the Gem. There was a restaurant there, and he went back and he says to Davy, "We're in Naas now." And Davy said, "Jesus, that's great. I'm feckin' starving," he said. So they headed off anyway. He had his sandwiches and his cold tea and headed off up to Bus Áras. And he got out at Bus Áras anyway, and he was looking up at all the tall buildings. And he got sunburn on the roof of his mouth from some of this, right? And he got out anyway, went around to see where he was, try and get his bearings. and he saw this, oh, I missed a bit. Right, before he left for Dublin, there was this local lady called the widow Dunn. And she had a son called Cornelius Dunn, and he was a bit of a waster. And he used to drink half of her pension, or her widow's pension. And then he ended up he ended up breaking into the local pub or something like that. So he skedaddled off to Dublin. And she had a letter from him from Dublin about 3 or 4 years before. And the address she had from him was Cornelius Dunn, Store Street, WC1, Dublin. This was the address. So when she heard that Davy was heading up to Dublin, she gave him the address and said, would you keep a lookout for Neely? Neely was the short name they had for Cornelius. So that was fine. So he got out of the bus anyway, in Bus Áras, and he was looking around and he saw this sign above for Store Street. And he said, oh, your man mustn't be too far from here. I'll have a look out for him while I'm about before I go off and see the Pope. So he saw the sign for Store Street, and then he went around looking, and he saw this other sign for WC, right? So he headed off towards the WC and went in, and then there was, so WC1 was the address, so he went in, and there was these 10 doors, so he went down 10, 9, 8, down to the first one, and the door was locked, so he knocked on the door, and he says, are you nearly done? And, and your man shouts out from inside, he says, I am, but I have no paper, right? And he says, that's no excuse for not writing to your mother, he says. So he headed off anyway to see the Pope, and he got caught up in some business and met some people that he hadn't met before, and he missed the bus back down to Tipperary. So he ended up outside at the Red Cow roundabout again, hitchhiking, heading back down to Tipperary, back down home. And who should pick him up? Only these two nuns in a red Fiat 127, where you have to, one nun had to get out to leave him in the back, and then, you know, those ones. And the back seat is so close to the front seat that he had to stick himself out between the two seats to get any room to stretch out his legs or his knees. So he was talking away to these two nuns, and did you see the Pope, and wasn't it great, and the crowd and all of that. And they were heading away down anyway. There was an older nun and a younger nun, and the younger nun was driving, and the older nun was giving directions. She was the expert. She had experience, and this one was inexperienced, as you, yeah. So there they were anyway, and they're heading down the road from Dublin, down the Naas dual carriageway, as we call it, and there was these flyover roads around Naas, and it went in under the flyover, and the young nun was kind of driving away, concentrating on the road, and this thing came down off of the bridge and landed on the windscreen of the car, and it kind of it was black and it was kind of like a blob. And next minute they had a good look at it, and it was the devil. He was there on the windscreen, you know. And the older one was given direction. He says, put on the wipers. So the wipers was going on there across his face. He was spitting at them, you know. And then she put on the windscreen washer, and it was throwing water, and there was soapy water into his eyes, and he was like that, like that, you know. And then the old nun was there giving directions, and she says to the younger nun, show him your cross. You know, that might scare him. Next minute, the young nun, stop for a second as you're on the window. Get off the shagging windscreen!